Okay, welcome everybody to Pilgrim's discussion on creation justice in your ballot and understanding local election roles. We're just having a conversation. This is not formal. So for those who might be watching this recording, just know that this is just a group of people chatting and we hope that it's useful to you. Okay, cool. Like now let's not worry about what people might think if they were to see it. Okay. So Jeff, do you want to just kind of do an overview of the topics and then we can see what people really want to focus in on?
Yeah, and I can kind of manage the controls. I don't know that I can hand over because I know we talked about you being able to control my screen. I don't know if I can get that to work, but
I don't think we need, I think it's okay if we don't have that. That's okay.
Yeah. So we were, and of course my graphics are cut off here, but youcanvote.org. If you were here last week with us, or not with us, but with the racial justice team, I think they talked about this website a little bit. You Can Vote is one of two like super helpful websites this election season in terms of getting people registered and informed and making sure their ballots get counted. And one of their features is they have a nice voting guide here where you can go, what's on my ballot, and see what's on the 2020 ballot. So we're kind of using this as our roadmap. Hopefully it will load here. Asking this little Chromebook to do a lot, but
yeah, it's great because it's a non-partisan tool.
Yes.
So I feel like there's nothing to feel, you evaluate it according to what matters to you.
Yeah. So then they have all of these issue-based things, guides you can choose from, and one of them is climate change. So click learn more here. There is a nice kind of roadmap here that I kind of adapted in my PowerPoint for the different things that are on our ballot. So Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisors, starting at the very bottom. That is a race that is, it's always it's the very last thing on your ballot. And I feel like it's something that people just, they're not sure what it is or, who it's for. And, maybe you'll find an endorsement at the last minute or something, or maybe you don't fill it in at all, or you choose a name that sounds good to you. It's a nonpartisan race. So it's, there's not a lot when you're standing there. If you don't know it's coming, there's not a lot to go off of. So that's one we're going to spend some time on. County commissioners, mayors, city councils, you see there's an asterisk. We can talk a little bit about why those are important and why they're not necessarily important in the next month. Commissioner of Agriculture is probably the next most important one on the Council of State. And that's a very interesting race this year that we can touch on and talk a little bit about and talk about resources to help you get your information and make decisions. And then the NC General Assembly is kind of the other big body that's on our ballot right now, aside from, NC Attorney General, Governor, Congress, President. I feel like we've heard a lot about those. So we're going to try to start at the bottom because those are the ones we don't talk enough about. And they're the ones that make the most impact to our communities. So, so we got this kind of roadmap up here, and we can kind of go in any order. These are kind of the four big topics, and whatever people are interested in hearing about, I am happy to delve into.
Yeah, one thing that Jeff and I had talked about is that we know that there might be a lot of knowledge in the room, so we don't want to be just sort of talking at you about stuff you already know about. So if folks have if you're like, yes, that all sounds good, go through it the way you want to, or if you're like, I already know about soil and water, I want to know more about the General Assembly, that sort of feedback is super helpful for us. So yeah, if folks could speak up about what works for you, that would help guide us.
Hello?
Hello?
Whatever way you want to do it.
You can just go straight through from the bottom of the top, I think, and kind of talk about some things.
I know Soil and Water Conservation District is one that we there's so many names on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one that, for me, for sure, I had seen some names more often than others. And I'm like, oh, I guess those are the, preferred candidates, but they might just be the ones with the most, money for signs. But so I think there are 4 or 5 candidates on there, and once again, before getting into the candidates, why is it important? What do they do? So I wasn't totally sure when I started looking into this, but I did a little research, and they do a lot of the local planning and funding for initiatives to conserve and protect our natural resources in Durham County. So we have a lot of very nice rivers and protected forests in Durham County, and we also have water systems and land use systems so people, especially in more rural parts of northern Durham County, can grow food on land, and so we can all get water to our homes. And that's money that's General Assembly appropriates in the budget, and it goes through the Commissioner of Agriculture and the statewide Soil and Water Conservation Board, and it goes down to the districts, and the districts kind of have the jurisdiction over how that money gets spent and how those things are organized. There's money that goes into kind of public-private partnerships with businesses to help keep our water clean and our land healthy and our soil healthy, and they're in charge of all of that. So that's kind of policy-wise why it's important. Politically, it's important for some different reasons. I note that we have 1 open seat on our Soil and Water Conservation District Board of Supervisors, and that is because Natalie Murdoch, who was elected, I want to say in 2016, was appointed to the NC State Senate seat vacated by State Senator Floyd McKissick, who, if you don't know, was a longtime state senator here and was appointed to the State Utilities Board. So there was a vacancy, and Natalie Murdoch won the primary back in March, and so the local Democratic Party appointed her to the seat. So she's running in the general for the seat that she was appointed to. And I mention all this just to say that this is a local office that your leaders of tomorrow are going to be seeking out. These are people that are looking to get their start in local politics and local policymaking. And so the people you elect to this office tomorrow very well could be your state reps and your state senators and your county commissioners, in 4, 6, 8 years. So it's something to keep in mind. That's not necessarily tied to creation justice, but and so then the last point I have here is 3 of the 5 candidates are currently associate supervisors on the board. So if you go to their website here, you can get some more information about what they do. I think Durham County's websites are usually pretty informative. If you click on Board of Supervisors, so these are the current supervisors, and then so you look at the associate supervisors, 3 of the candidates on the ballot here are currently associate supervisors that are appointed to the board. So they're looking to go from an associate role on the board that was appointed to an elected office. So that kind of gives you some sense of where these candidates, are coming from. So any questions so far? I know I just threw a lot out there. Yes, no, maybe?
Who appoints people?
I think it is appointed through the city and the county. I'm not entirely sure. I assume it's an appointment process, not unlike what we have for library board of directors, planning commissioners. There's actually a website, and I don't have it offhand, but you can look in the city and county at boards within the city and county that have openings on them, and you can apply for them, which incidentally is a great way to get involved in your community. So, if you were interested in working in the Soil and Water Conservation District, it looks like, there's a chance there might be an associate supervisor role opening that, you might want to apply for. That's actually another really good point. So.
Thank you. I just didn't know how it worked.
So kind of, we got the lay of the land, a resource that I have found useful in the past, and certainly not the only resource, for choosing local candidates. Are you familiar with the Durham People's Alliance?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I've been peripherally, aware, and obviously, if you know them from anything, it's if you've gone to vote in local elections, they are the folks outside with the green ballots, the sample ballots on green paper, and they send lots of mailers out. And it is a member-driven organization that has a political action committee that endorses candidates for local office, but also for statewide office. They, up and down the ballot, they have a meeting and they vote. It's a very open, often messy democratic process. I've gone to one endorsement meeting and it started at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday and ended just after midnight.
Mm-hmm.
And that was for literally there was one big race that they were voting on an endorsement for. So it's an interesting process. But
Jeff, is that a partisan organization, or not necessarily? It's like
Durham being Durham, it's a nonpartisan organization. They don't have any ties to the Democratic Party.
Okay.
And it's, in Durham, where it's, kind of a one-party town in terms of a lot of elected, it's a lot of making endorsements in primaries. The lay of the land in Durham politics is that, primary elections and local nonpartisan elections are super important and competitive. And there are a couple of major political action committees that make their endorsements that are hugely influential and will help a candidate win. People's Alliance is one of them. The Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People is the second, and I'm blanking on a third. There's Friends of Durham, which is a more kind of what counts in Durham for a conservative organization, more pro-business, pro-chamber of commerce. But yeah, there are a couple of other. So they're one of the big groups that kind of can be a help for candidates that are running for local office.
Okay. Cool.
But one of the useful things they do, aside from just, if you decide you like their brand and you like their endorsements, just voting their slate of endorsed candidates, is they're very transparent, and they post the surveys or, requested information for endorsement meetings on their website, so their members and the general public can access it. So I looked up the blog post, and I can email this out to folks. These are all the folks that are running, and they asked them all to submit a brief statement and a resume, and you can go through and you can look at, their various, what they submitted. And, some of them did not submit anything, which, is certainly their prerogative. But most of them submitted at least a statement. So if you want to look at, Terrence Priester's biographical resume, the PDF he submitted is right here, and you can look through exactly, this is a Word doc. But yeah, you can look through and read,
get a sense of who he is.
Yeah, and they note for this office, for Soil and Water, they did not create a questionnaire. Often they will create a very detailed questionnaire. And it's interesting, my experience with this was Board of Commissioners race in the primary earlier this year. It's interesting to see they had 15 candidates for 5 endorsement slots on that. And it was interesting to go through all of these questionnaires and see how different candidates approach them, whether they wrote just long paragraphs and it was like a 20-page response, or it was very short and bullet pointed. And you got an interesting sense of the candidate from how they approached it, and if their approach, was not only in line with your policy thinking, but maybe your organizational thinking or your writing style. It was kind of interesting. So this is one great resource I would recommend in terms of making local election decisions. Not the only one. In general, I think if you have the time to read questionnaires that organizations making endorsements, if they've made the questionnaires public, if you have the time to read them, I think they're really interesting. The other one that's not out yet, but to keep an eye out for, is the local independent weekly, the
Indy.
The Indy Week.
Jeff, if we go to, I know Vote 411 is like kind of the big all-inclusive one. nonpartisan that the League of Women Voters puts on.
Mhm.
Does it get into detail for soil and
Yeah.
water
In fact,
conservation?
I can bring that up. I was looking it up. And so, yeah, another resource is Vote 411. And this, what I really like about Vote 411 is they do this nice, I don't know why it's not scrolling down for me now, but they go underneath these pictures is side by side. Oh no, you can compare it that way. So you can select the candidates and compare them side by side. So if you were
That's so
choosing
nice.
between Jolly Boyd and John Cromartie, um, you know,
The
you can,
COVID-19 pandemic has crip. All right.
yeah. So yeah, people, yes, and people, like I said, people have different approaches. Some age,
Yeah.
you can see how, seriously or what time people put into these. And,
Yeah.
so if we wanted to add Jillian Riley here, I guess you can only compare two side by side. But, if you were comparing, yeah, and you can just go down, and this is another survey that you get the full, what experience do you have? What are the most pressing needs facing the district right now? What's the most effective service program the district provides for your county?
Mm-hmm.
And then Vote 411, actually, you can build your ballot through this. They will go through, if you enter your address, they will show you everything on your ballot, show you all of the candidates, and you can then say, like, okay, I'm voting for Terrence Priester. And, it'll have, you will get a printed off voter guide of everyone you chose. So that's super cool.
Yeah, that's a really nice resource.
Yeah. Questions on that before we move on?
No question.
All right.
Now,
Go ahead.
I said no question.
I heard a different voice besides yours, Jeff, I thought for a second. Now, is this level of detail what folks need? Like, so this was a good sample one that we really wanted to focus in on. Is this a good level of detail for the next two discussions, or would folks like just sort of like a bullet point for the next two?
I would say bullet points for the next couple.
All right.
It's
Okay.
same
I know
information.
that this one in particular, Jeff wanted to spend some time on. So, but yeah, if we could just do like a quick overview and then just trusting that people can use these resources to learn about the folks.
Yeah, so the next thing I have here is the North Carolina Commissioner of Agriculture. So all of the soil and water districts flow up into the Soil and Water Conservation Board statewide, which is under the North Carolina Department of Agriculture, which is headed by the North Carolina Commissioner of Agriculture. So they're going to be in charge of all of the agribusiness, water quality, environmental education, food justice, sustainability, renewable energy, what you would imagine the Department of Agriculture in North Carolina would do. There are some other issues that have been brought up, particularly by the challenger in the race, that you might not think of the Commissioner of Agriculture as doing. But we'll talk about those in a second. The two candidates are the current incumbent, who is Steve Troxler, who is a Republican. He's held the office as long as I've lived here, past 10 years. He brought some stability to the office. Before that, one of the big things Commissioner of Agriculture does is run the North Carolina State Fair. And shortly before I moved here, there were some issues in State Fair vendor choices and kind of standard political, ethical issues, and he's brought a lot more stability to it. And from what I know, is pretty well regarded for his work. He's being challenged this year by a young woman in her 30s named Jenna Wadsworth, who is a Wake County Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisor, and was elected to that office when she was a student at North Carolina State University when she was 21, I believe. So another, point of how our soil and water district, is a feeder for the leaders of tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
but she is very interesting candidate. Obviously, a lot of experience for her age, and yeah, has kind of brought up some other issues that agriculture could do for greater across other areas, such as cannabis legalization, crosses over with criminal justice, rural broadband and healthcare, farm labor justice, support for minority farms and farmers. And an issue that's become increasingly kind of culture warish, controversial in the state is State Fair. If you've ever been, it has a booth by the Sons of Confederate Veterans, and they hand out lots of Confederate flag stickers that you see all over the fair. And it's becoming more of a question as to whether that's good or appropriate. So some other interesting issues that are kind of just below the surface on there. But once again, vote 411. You can look side by side at these two candidates.
Okay.
And see what they've, how they responded to this, what is important to note, nonpartisan survey.
And yeah, like just glancing at this right now, I can see that Steve's sort of his agenda is to help farmers be profitable and to stay in business, and that food is secure. And so, and I think that's really helpful for me, because I can certainly understand that perspective, and then you just have to decide, is that your goal, or you want somebody who's really actively focused on sustainability? And if we're looking at it with a creation justice lens, like, does that, which person is serving the creation justice idea? But it's still, it's still each person's individual choice to evaluate and decide.
Yeah, and I think they are both very strong candidates in this particular race, and I do think over the years Steve Troxler has had a pretty good reputation in his role, but yeah. I did want to we can share some of what Jenna Wadsworth as a millennial is doing in terms of campaigning if you're interested, but
maybe we can share this we can share the slideshow maybe to people if they wanted to look at it later or pass it on to people.
Yeah, I put a link to her Twitter. She is campaigning on TikTok a lot, which is very interesting, and I think you're going to see more of in the next few years as people, millennials and eventually Gen Z are seeking public office. And yeah, it's interesting because it's not what you normally see in a political candidate, but
yeah,
I think you're going to see more of it. So get ready for the future.
All right. I think that's probably good. And I would think enough of a sense of Commissioner of Agriculture if you're ready to move on to the next.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Are we good?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, do interrupt with questions. All right.
Yes, please do. So the NC General Assembly, this is another one that's kind of tough in Durham because you don't wind up with a lot of competitive races in the general election, to be perfectly honest about it. Durham's a pretty lopsided town in terms of voter registration. But General Assembly is hugely important for creation justice. They're the ones that are going to set the budget for the Department of Agriculture and the money that's going to flow back into our soil and water conservation districts. They're going to pass the laws that regulate our use of resources and environmental impact. They're going to, the ones that make sure we have vehicle inspections to keep fuel emissions low. They're the folks that are going to approve, Department of Transportation budgets for bike lanes and things like that. The money that's going to flow back to our cities, and then unfortunately, as climate change is, one of the effects of climate change is more serious natural disasters, and natural disasters affecting areas that weren't previously impacted. They're the ones that, when that happens in North Carolina, this time of year in particular, they're going to be providing the recovery resources. So it's hugely, hugely, important. And sometimes it's frustrating in Durham because we feel like we don't have a lot of choices when it comes to the general election. But that said, there are organizations that will rate and endorse your state legislators. North Carolina Sierra Club is one. that I know y'all are familiar with, because I think Dee sent me this link. So they keep a rolling list of endorsements for offices, and you can go down and see your NC Senate districts down here. Natalie Murdoch and Mike Woodard are both endorsed, which is important, depending on whose district you are in. Our NC House districts are down here. We got Vernetta Alston and Marsha Mori and Zach Hawkins. These are all our current incumbents in Durham, which is great. Another organization is Conservation PAC of North Carolina, which is the political PAC arm of the League of Conservation Voters. So they've also made endorsements in the Senate, and we see Natalie Murdoch and Mike Woodard again. We see Vernetta Alston, Marsha Mori, Zach Hawkins again. So that's all. Our incumbents are doing well from a creation justice standpoint, and earning, or at least in terms of what these organizations value, and that's worth looking into if their agenda for creation justice is one that we share or that you share. The other thing that I have found helpful in trying to feel like I have some more impact in the general election, North Carolina General Assembly, is to look right outside of Durham County and kind of adopt a candidate or legislator that might not be someone that is on my ballot, but is in a ballot nearby and is a champion of the issues I care about. And then contacting their campaign and seeing what they need in terms of folks to knock on doors, which isn't really a thing this year, make phone calls, if you're inclined to make contributions. All of these campaigns, there are a lot, especially in Wake County, that are, very tightly challenged races. They're not as Wake County is. The districts in Wake County are much more politically evenly divided. So going to these websites and maybe finding a candidate, in a district, a county over that is interesting to you, and, kind of adopting them is something, like I said, I found it in 2018 very rewarding. I went and worked knocking doors for some candidates in Wake County that were first-time candidates challenging incumbents on issues that I cared about, and they all won their races, and it felt really good on election night to know that I helped make some small difference in that. So something to keep in mind.
I had a question real quick, Jeff, before you go on. So one thing that our goal for this session is that partially that it would be just describing like the impact of just like your local elections that you have, and like how they make a difference in your day-to-day life, and how that can be a really good place to try and feel a sense of that your vote and your voice matters when you're voting locally, especially. And that we were using creation justice as kind of a lens, like if that's a thing if that is your goal, is to be focusing on creation justice, how can you evaluate these local elections that way? So, so we're hoping that people can kind of take these tools and this way of thinking, and then apply it to other issues that move your heart. Maybe if it's healthcare, if it's social justice, but it's the same tools and the same kind of mentality, even though we're talking more about creation justice.
You can vote and help with all of those things. Go back to that overview. If you've kind of looked over everyone in terms of that creation justice climate change lens, and you're like, well, what about, you talk about all these issues overlap. What about healthcare? And you can look here and see what offices impact healthcare and how some of them are the same.
Yeah, a lot of times it's the same office. It's just a different way of thinking about the office.
Exactly. So, questions about any of that? Yes, no, maybe? All right, we can move on to the last slide here. So one thing that I pointed out was that on the what's on your ballot here, and I clicked away from the screen, the climate on your ballot, they note right after this, the county commissioners, mayors, and city councils, and there's an asterisk in 2021 listed there. And that is because our offices for these, the city elections are in odd numbered years in Durham. They are, so 2019, 2021, et cetera. So none of those are on our ballot this year. Durham County Board of Commissioners is on the ballot this year, but once again, this is an impact of Durham being a very politically slanted town in terms of party registration. No Republicans ran for county commissioners in the primary. There are no Republicans on the ballot in fall. So there were, as I mentioned earlier, a field of 15 Democrats back in March that ran for five spots on the ballot in the primary for 5 open seats on the Board of Commissioners. Those 5, you will get your ballot, and it is literally five names on the ballot, and you can choose up to 5. Those 5 people have effectively already won, and they will be, in January, our new commissioners. So the opportunity to have a say on that was in March, unfortunately, because not as many people vote in primary elections, even in very exciting primary election years like this year. So that's kind of a bummer. But the silver lining of it is I think, 3 incumbents all won re-election and 2 newcomers won. And they were, I think they were good candidates. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. They also, talking about how the PAC system, they were 2 of the only candidates that got the majority of the PAC endorsements. So another thing that's, about just local Durham politics in general. That said, the next thing that's going to impact our local elections is going to be next year in November 2021. The mayor of Durham is going to be on the ballot. He's on the ballot every 2 years, and half the city council is on the ballot. So we alternate. They have 4-year terms alternating between. So this year, it's kind of confusing. We have 3 at-large members that can be from anywhere in Durham, and then we have 3 ward-based members. Durham is divided into 3 wards, but while the candidates have to be from those wards, everybody votes on all 3 wards.
So I think, I can't speak for the others. That is a higher level of detail than I'm ready to remember right now. But what is useful to me about what you're saying is that if we're wondering what's going on with the other offices, they're happening in off years, and that these primary elections are really like an effective time to be paying attention and to be voting. Because your vote really goes a lot farther. So
the lesson here is definitely that the primaries and those off-year elections, especially in Durham, are really important to pay attention to, because the Board of Commissioners and the City Council, they do a lot with land use and development, which is a huge part of creation justice.
Housing, and I could also imagine it being housing stuff too.
Housing issues, yes, and we have issues both with what we call Big A affordable housing, which is subsidized housing of Durham Housing Authority, and making more subsidized housing available and making sure the subsidized housing we have is livable, as some of you might remember with McDougald Terrace earlier this year. And then small A affordable housing, which is making sure the rates on market rate housing are something that, families can afford, where Durham's growing very fast, and there was a lot of pressure to increase the housing stock in Durham to keep prices down. And part of that is, where are we going to develop? What kind of housing are we going to develop? Are we going to continue developing big, sprawling neighborhoods with, lots of land on each lot, or are we going to look at more compact?
I think I just activated Jeff Lakin Durham can.
No, I'm done. We can have talks about that next year, but it's important, and there will be a mayor on the ballot and 3 city council members, including one who will be on the ballot for the first time because he was appointed earlier this year. Wow, I just blanked.
That's okay, Jeff. Don't worry. Speaking for myself, I won't remember. What's important for me to remember is pay attention to the primaries, and there's important offices that come in off year. So I think that's the main bullet point for that.
Pierce Fraley, that's who was just appointed.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I think what I'd like to do is, if somebody has a question that you think would be good for the recording, please share it. But otherwise, I think what I'm going to do is just close off the recording, and then we can do our last minute questions and goodbyes. So does anybody have any questions for the good of the recording? Okay, awesome. So thank you to anybody out there in cyberspace who might be watching this. We hope that it helps you in evaluating your decisions for local elections in Durham. And feel free to come to a Pilgrim worship sometime. All right, take care.
I have one final slide.
Do show.
Which is just to remember that elections are only the start of our creation justice advocacy. Whoever winds up taking office in January of next year, we are going to need to keep pressure on them. They have so many issues that are facing them, and their attention is so divided. We have to keep them focused. And these are organizations that Pilgrim has worked with, and members of Pilgrim have worked with, that hopefully in the next year after the elections, we will be continuing advocacy. Interfaith Power and Light is a organization that is NC Council of Churches has signed on to. There's a faith-based creation justice organization. Sunrise Movement, you might have heard about in terms of being a national organization that is advocating for what they call the Green New Deal, both nationally and locally. Hopefully these are organizations we can work with after the election to make sure our elected leaders are keeping creation justice at the forefront.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Jeff. All right. I'm going to stop the recording.